everyone, Iris here. In today's video, we are going to talk about the 7 things you should include in your resume so that it tells the right story about your experience and so that it actually gets reviewed by a human being. If you've been on the job market for quite some time, you know that you've applied to many roles and maybe haven't heard back or haven't gotten an interview. So let's talk about some things that you can include in your resume so that we're making sure that you're not making any mistakes on it on your end. I used to work with someone who used to say, you're only perfect twice in your life, the day you're born and the day you write your resume. Your resume is meant to tell the right story about your experience, so let's make sure that you're telling that story as perfectly as possible. My first piece of advice to you is to focus on your accomplishments versus your responsibilities. A lot of people end up writing their resumes listing off tasks and responsibilities that they do day to day in their role, like I sold cars, or I coded in React, or I was a marketing person responsible for this. We don't want to hear about your responsibilities, but instead what you've accomplished and what you're going to bring to this new company that you're applying for. So maybe instead, try sentences like, I overhauled the entire marketing team by doing this, or I grew sales by X% by doing this. You're going to want to highlight your accomplishments to really tell the story of what impact you can make at this new place. The next thing I want to talk about is typos. Now, this may seem very common sense and obvious, but you'd be surprised how many resumes I look at are full of typos. This is a big no-no because a lot of the clients I work with won't even glance at a resume if it has typos in it. As a recruiter, if I really like the candidate and I see a typo in their resume, I might call them and take the time to tell them, hey, there's a typo in your resume, do you mind editing it? But I am the exception, not the rule. A lot of recruiters will not take the time to do that. Your resume is your foot in the door with the company, so don't let something as small as this mess up your chances of getting an interview. Another thing you should make sure to include in your resume is industry and skill set keywords. When you apply online to the applicant tracking systems, a lot of them will weed out people based on keywords. So if you're a developer, you'll want to include keywords like React or Python or whatever language it is that you code in. A lot of these applicant tracking systems are smart enough to basically pull out the resumes that aren't going to be relevant and actually rate people by relevance. So you'll want to make sure you include as many keywords as possible that relate to the role and that relate to your job experience so that it goes to the top of the virtual pile. The next thing I want to talk about is dates of employment. You should always make sure to include those in your resume, the month and the year, because it really gives the hiring manager and interviewer a sense of your level of commitment. I work in LA with a lot of startups, and there's a lot of jumping around and a lot of mass layoffs, so you'll want to make sure that you're telling the story in the right way depending on your job market and depending on how long you were in the role and why you left. Generally though, it's really good to just include the month and the year versus just the year because once again, a hiring manager doesn't want to spend time training someone who's just going to be gone in 6 months. Now, the next thing I'm not necessarily a stickler about, but a lot of employers are, is to include your education on your resume. If it's not there, I assume you didn't go to college or university or whatever that education is. The one piece of advice I do have personally as a preference is to never include the year that you graduated. The reason for that is because recruiters and hiring managers are human, and everyone has biases and different lenses that they view things through, and the last thing you want is for someone to view you as too green or too seasoned based on the year that you graduated or received a degree. When writing your resume, it's really important that you include the most recent position at the top. I've seen quite a few resumes that go in chronological order from your first job to your most recent job being on the last page, and that's not really helpful for recruiters. And the reason for that is because typically recruiters and hiring managers only ever look at the first page of a resume. So you'll want to make sure that the whole top half of the first page of your resume has the most relevant, most recent experience and all the information you actually want them to see. Otherwise, it's not going to get looked at. My last piece of advice is for you to make sure that your resume is very easy to follow. There's a reason that resumes are written in bullet point format and all in the right tense. It's because it makes them very easy to read. Spare yourself the novel. You'll want to make sure that it's clear and concise so that the hiring manager and interviewer can get a good sense of your story without falling asleep. So there you have it. If you do these simple things, you can ensure that your resume isn't eliminated after the first look. I really hope this was helpful, and if it was, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this coming your way. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in a bit.